Good evening. It has been the longest of 5 months. Today, though, the biggest relaxation yet in the roadmap out of lockdown. Across the capital right now, pubs and restaurants are allowed to have diners and drinkers from different households inside. The entertainment industry starts again tonight, with gigs and shows making a very welcome return. All of us are hoping the numbers up for restrictions. The Bingo Hall is another venue where we can socialise in person. There is still caution, though. In 4 boroughs around London, surge testing continues, trying to stamp out the Indian variants from taking hold. Here's our political correspondent, Simon Harris.
The Indian variant might make this a game of chance, but the latest unlocking saw London's casinos back in business. So too were gym classes for anyone after that all-important beach body. The first Sunseekers flew out from Gatwick, and across the capital, restaurants and bars welcomed diners and drinkers back in from the cold. This French brasserie in Mayfair has had a tough time since it opened 9 months ago.
It's been challenging. We've had to deal with being a new restaurant. We've had to be dealing with the fact of reopening in such a stressful, inconsistent market, and it will be now the 3rd opening after closing twice.
Show me! Get those heads moving!
In Brixton, there was no shortage of customers willing to be put through their paces in the first indoor gym classes since last year.
It feels really good. It reminds me of what it used to be before the lockdown. That's exactly what it used to be.
It was nice. It was kind of just like people reuniting and coming back again. So it was a good energy, kind of fresh energy, almost like Bambi coming and starting to walk again.
I deliberately didn't come when they opened on the 12th. Saved it for this day. High five me.
Indoor activity wasn't limited to grown-ups. Children's soft play centres like this one at Rayleigh in Essex were able to throw open their doors.
It's so lovely for them to be out and exploring and having a nice time, yeah.
And also being able to be together inside is so important because the weather's been so terrible.
It's really, really nice. I think my little one in particular, she's really, really missed it.
But the relaxation of the rules isn't without risk. Around 400 Londoners have tested positive for the Indian variant of COVID. Yet the mayor, who was in Chinatown, is determined to press ahead with a multi-million-pound ad campaign to get visitors back into London and back onto public transport.
It is possible, I think, to have a great time, to enjoy yourself, but also to do it safely. That's why it's really important for us to follow the advice to wear a face mask when moving around a restaurant, wear a face mask using public transport, wash your hands regularly and thoroughly, but also have a great time.
Worryingly, London still has a lower vaccine take-up than any other part of England. It's a particular problem in the East End borough of Tower Hamlets, where doctors are trying to encourage more people to join the queues for jabs.
Eat Out to Help Out last year, there was a big surge after that, and that was in August when the weather was quite nice and people could sit outside. The weather's awful at the moment, so people are going to be naturally going inside, and I am very worried that this is going to create another surge.
The lifting of the ban on foreign holidays in some countries doesn't go far enough for the travel industry. But today's cautious relaxing of the rules is a test to see if the next milestone on the government's roadmap is possible. Simon Harris, ITV News, Mayfair.
Now, after a year when so many have avoided public transport, one way of getting around is growing in popularity. But until now, riding an e-scooter on the streets of London has been illegal. But that could be about to change. A trial will start in June, run by TfL and London councils, to rent e-scooters from 3 companies in a similar way to Boris bikes. Our political correspondent, Simon Harris, reports.
They're illegal to ride on the road, not to mention the pavement, but battery-powered e-scooters have become an increasingly common sight in London. Plenty of commuters were using them today, even though they risk a £300 fine. But from next month, some e-scooters will finally be allowed as part of an experimental hire scheme.
We can't uninvent these e-scooters. They are here to stay. So our job is to look at how can we make this work for London and make it as safe as we possibly can.
The e-scooters for hire will all have a maximum speed of 12.5 miles an hour, front and rear lights permanently on, and riders must first do an online safety course. For an experiment designed to promote sustainable transport, there's one other rule which might come as a surprise. Anyone hiring an e-scooter must have a driving licence, or at the very least a provisional licence, to prove they're over 18. Transport for London has chosen 3 firms to run the year-long trial in a handful of boroughs. Alan, from one of the firms, explained how riders can get their hands on an e-scooter.
The first thing they'll need to do is take out their smartphone and, using the camera on their smartphone, scan the QR code here. That unlocks the scooter and then the scooter's ready for use. The other thing that people will notice is the large ID plates here, both on the front and the back of each scooter. And finally, every scooter is equipped with a bell.
Privately owned e-scooters will still be illegal, and riders can expect to be pulled over by the police, as witnessed by this week's edition of the Tonight programme on ITV.
These are illegal. They are not allowed to be used in public.
For someone like Jürgen, the e-scooter revolution is a worry. He's severely sight impaired after a brain tumour damaged his optic nerve.
We're nervous at the best of times, right, about noises you can't identify, is someone coming up around you, whatever it might be. So, people using them without any significant training, without having a real knowledge around road safety or awareness of those around them, it just puts people at unnecessary risk.
I think it's potentially an exciting new addition to London's transport network, but we need to make sure they don't become obstacles and dangers to people using our pavements.
The outcome of the trial in London and other cities is expected to be used by ministers to decide future laws for all e-scooters. Simon Harris, ITV News.
And there's more on the e-scooter trials on ITV later this week on the programme E-Scooters, Britain's New Road Rage, tonight. That's this Thursday at 7:30 p.m.
Surge vaccinations will start in one London borough after a rise in cases of the Indian variant. In the last hour, the Health Secretary has urged those living in Hounslow to come forward and get the jab if they're eligible. Well, our political correspondent Simon Harris is here. Simon, tell us more about this.
Well, it's perhaps not surprising that Hounslow and West London is to be the target of surge vaccinations. It is currently London's COVID hotspot, with around 60 new cases for every 100,000 people. Compare that with Havering or Hackney, where it's down to just 9 new cases for every 100,000 people. Hounslow is also one of a number of areas which have been identified as having the Indian variant. And although the number of cases of the Indian variant in Hounslow is low compared with places like Blackburn and Bolton, it is going up, which is why the government has decided to take action.
What this means in practice is putting in more testing sites, and on vaccinations, making more vaccinations available to everyone who's eligible. To everyone in these areas, please exercise caution, get a test, and as soon as you're eligible, get the jab.
Note the use of the word eligible there. What the government isn't doing yet is inviting people under 35 to get vaccinated. Interestingly, the Health Secretary also said today the government is now relying extensively on the testing of sewage to identify areas of concern.
Oh, that's interesting. OK, thank you, Simon.
Well, the first flights took off for Portugal earlier this week, but foreign travel is still grounded for the majority. The boss of Southend Airport fears it could stay that way if compulsory COVID tests mean travel is only available for those who can afford it. The airport won't open to passengers for another week. Our political correspondent Simon Harris reports.
Southend Airport has been hibernating. There hasn't been a passenger flight since January. Airport staff have been furloughed. Around 20 employees were made redundant. And the crisis in the aviation industry has caused collateral damage. Because there are no passengers on planes, there's no one at the taxi rank.
We've really struggled, like I'm sure everyone has, to be honest with you. We've been here since day one. It's been really hard.
Next week, Southend will welcome back the first passengers, but they'll be confronted by the government's traffic light system of red, amber and green countries and rules about tests and quarantine. Tests are now available at the airport, but at £99 a go, it's not cheap or quick.
We would say allow 24 hours from the point that the test has reached the lab, so the testing happens here on site. The courier will then take it to a lab in Norwich and then you'll get your result within 24 hours. So enough time for the requirements when flying.
The airport's boss fears many of Southend's traditional customers simply won't be able to afford to fly.
If we get to a situation in which a test, which is required and is required multiple times, costs 3 times the price of a ticket on a low-cost carrier, then we do risk reducing it to the province of the rich, which it was, many years ago.
2 years ago, Southend Airport was a success story with a growing number of flights. But the pandemic changed everything. Last summer, EasyJet shut down its operation at Southend. The local MP has his own reasons for hoping the airport will prosper.
I think it isn't a secret, but I want Southend and I expect Southend to become a city. And with our wonderful sovereign celebrating 70 years on the throne next year, I do think that the airport, in terms of its viability, has got an important role to play.
A sentiment echoed by the businesses which rely on the airport.
Obviously, seeing planes in the sky is our biggest hope. Planes in the sky means passengers jumping into taxis, which is good for us.
A week tomorrow, the first passenger flights in 6 months will take off from Southend. But with so many unanswered questions about international travel, this is an industry which can't be sure of its final destination.
Well, Simon is in Westminster for his programme, The Late Debate. Here's a look at what's coming up.
On tonight's programme, I'll be joined by the Minister for London, Paul Scully, former Transport Minister Baroness Kramer and Rupert Huck to talk about the uncertainty over when and where we can travel for our summer holidays and the threat posed by the growing number of cases in London of the Indian variant. We'll also look at today's big announcement about the future of the railways and what it means for the capital's commuters. That's The Late Debate on ITV after news at 10.